Hi, and welcome back to Good Distinctions. I'm your host, Will Wright, and joining me today is Aurelio Porfiri, author of The Right Hand of the Lord is Exalted, a new title from Sophia Institute Press. Aurelio, welcome to Good Distinctions.
Thank you for having me.
So first, I'll just ask you, if you could, just give a little bit of background. Who are you, so that our listeners can know?
Yes, so I am an Italian, a Roman. I am a musician by formation and background, and I'm also a writer, and I study things usually related with music, but also with the Catholic Church, with liturgy, with sacred music. And also I devoted a lot of time also to study China and Chinese things. So yes, this is basically what I'm doing.
Excellent. Well, and I saw from your bio that you spent 7 years teaching in Macau. Is that right?
Exactly. Yes, I spent 7 years in Macau, and then also recently, until 3 months ago, I was for 1 year in Hong Kong.
Okay.
Because I don't know if this was in my bio, but because I work on some books with Cardinal Zen, and these books are indeed published by Sophia Institute Press. Yes, so I have a lot to do with China.
Fascinating. And that's a remarkable experience for you. I'm sure Cardinal Zen is such an inspiration.
Yeah,
And
yes,
a good
and
man in the
I
church.
know him for 20 years, so I can say we are friends, and I really consider him a really kind person. Really, you meet him and you say, "Oh, he's a cardinal," but he's so easygoing and so approachable that really make very easy to get along with him.
Fantastic. So this book, The Right Hand of the Lord is Exalted, the subtitle is A History of Catholic Traditionalism from Vatican II Traditionis Custodes. So with that, you go from just before the Second Vatican Council, really, up to the present, or more or less the present.
Of course.
And of course, with I teach history at a high school level, and so I always tell them when we get into current events, listen, this is as far as I can take you. There's always more that's happening every day. And so I can't get too far ahead. But it's what I found when I read it is that it's a very clinical approach, if that's the right word, to just looking at the issues at hand. And it seems, short of being a Catholic, you don't really have a horse in this fight. You're just laying out sort of what happened over the last few decades.
Yeah, I have to say that your interpretation has a lot of truth inside, in the sense that what I wanted to do is to present the traditionalist word with respect, because I know that also the people that I don't agree with their own their own thesis or their own fights, but I know that they do this to make sense in a situation that is so complicated and difficult like today. Also, as I say in my book, and also Professor De Mattei explained in his introduction, I don't think that exists, but there are many kind of traditionalisms. I don't know if in English you can say that, but there are many different kinds. So it's not that I don't have an horse on this fight, because of course I share most of the idea of traditionalism. I also want the liturgy to be reverent, the doctrine to be respected, the tradition to be revered. I mean, I also want this. But first of all, I don't like to be labeled traditionalist, because it's like a label that put you in a box, and I don't want to be in that box. Also, because in several articles also I explain that also in traditionalism there is a danger. So I just, as you say, I just think to be a bad Catholic, and that is what I am. But what I want to represent, as you say, is really try to show things as they happen in a plausible reconstruction. I don't pretend to be 100% objective, and no one is, even historians. But what I want to do is just to reconstruct things that happen in the last century. And then I think the people that read will be able themselves to also see the reasons of people that identify themselves as a traditionalist. So I don't want to be, partisan. No, I don't like that.
Well, and I think there's definitely a lot of merit in the way that you laid the book out, and so I want to congratulate you on that.
Thank
It's
you.
something that you can absolutely get into a minefield of sorts where there's all sorts of different nuances, and it is a complex, rich web of ideas. So when I speak to my friends about this, who also study theology, we often say, like, we're not traditionalists, but we do want to be traditional Catholics.
Yeah,
we
of
want
course.
to make sure
Yes.
that we embrace the whole tradition, and like yourself, not to the extent that you are. I'm a musician as well,
Oh,
and I love our Catholic patrimony of sacred
of
music,
course.
chant and polyphony, and even some good hymnody from the last hundreds of years. And I had a very. Are you familiar with the American group Floriani and their work?
Floriani, no, I'm not familiar.
Okay. Well, there's this group in the United States, actually based here in Phoenix, Arizona, where I am, called Floriani, and they're a group of gentlemen who are attempting to restore sacred music in America, and they do.
That's great.
They do amazing work. It's they provide concerts where they'll do different chants and styles of music from the last over 2,000 years. They have one Hebrew chant that would have been done probably at the Last Supper.
Wow.
And it's beautiful. It's a cappella. It's very, very well done. And then when they serve the mass, they sing these beautiful, beautiful chants. And it elevates the whole experience, and it helps really put into context what the liturgy is.
Of course,
That it's something that God does.
It is the purpose of sacred music,
Right.
to give glory to God and to elevate the faithful. A purpose that, unfortunately, with the music that we have in our modern liturgies is not fulfilled. So that is something that is really.
So, I mean, it's as a musician, this is something where I've certainly made my own sort of transformative journey, if you will. I mean, I was doing, singing and guitars and drums and all that some time ago. But as soon as I started to just scratch the surface of what we believe as Catholics, I couldn't go back. It set me on a new trajectory. And for myself, just make this a little bit more biographical for a moment, but I found myself really, really enraptured with traditionalism. I thought this must be the answer. This is going to save the church. This is going to be the way forward. And I personally became very, very disheartened sometime after that, because I found myself getting bitter, resentful, cynical. And so I now sort of distance myself from traditionalism in a very real sense. But nonetheless, I think the things that you lay out in here are important for people to understand, because, like you said, people need to know what are the actual issues.
Exactly.
And what leads people to hold these positions. It's not just a love of the Latin Mass, for example, in a vacuum.
Yes.
There's something else going on. So I guess my next question is, what led you to actually want to write this book?
Is exactly what I explained to you. So that I want to present in the more objective way that is possible what is this phenomenon about. Because sometimes, especially in the recent years, traditionalists are demonized, and that is also not good, because a lot of good people also in this field. But I think that if people can understand better from where they come and even seeing their limitations, they will be able to appreciate some of their fights.
What do you think those, obviously there's many different traditionalisms, like Professor Demite says, but what do you see as some of those limitations, broadly speaking?
Limitations is the one that the people that build an ivory tower and they start to believe that they are the true church, or they become the true church. And this is, of course, cannot be. I always say that you have to consider traditionalism as if it is an hotel. I mean, your house is not working well, is in need of reparation. Okay, so you take refuge in the hotel that we call traditionalism, but you have always to remember that your house is not the hotel, is the house. So that is the point, and some people may say, oh, but if the church is going like this, well, we can return to our house. Yes, I don't know. Of course, I don't have an answer, but it's not necessary we have all the answers. Of course, this is an open question. All of us, we can see the crisis and the issues that are around us, but it's not a solution to create a false alternative. That's my point.
Well, and as you lay out in the book so well, there's different gradations to that solution, so to speak, where you might have, and I guess for those listening, maybe who haven't read the book, who aren't familiar with traditionalism, it's a very, very broad spectrum.
Yes.
Both those who are within the church and those who are schismatic and everything in between. When it comes to something like the Second Vatican Council or the new Mass, I know that I'll use the example of the Society of St. Pius X, for example.
Yes.
Half of the bishops and priests, now this isn't a scientific analysis, but around half at one point, at least from what I know, believe that the new Mass was poison to the soul and therefore evil, and that the Second Vatican Council was something that needed to be jettisoned completely. Now, that's a very, very strong position. But for the other half, assuming that's correct, for the other half who are in the Society of St. Pius X, part of that organization, who don't think that the Second Vatican Council needs to be jettisoned whole hog, and who believe that the new Mass is deficient but not evil, where do we draw the line of what's acceptable and what's schismatic, practically speaking, for those who are listening who are just trying to figure it out? And
yes.
Maybe you don't have the answer, but what are your thoughts on that?
So, the kind of statistics that you present, of course, we have to see what is the ground for this kind of statistics. But for what I know, also, I think this may depend also from like the fraternity of St. Pius X in the US, that may be more radical than it is in Italy or in other countries of Europe. Okay. But sure. I think that what they say is that the Novus Ordo Mass is valid, at least most of them say this, but its spiritual overcome is not so effective, something like this. And of course, if we see the way the Mass is celebrated, I think most of us can agree with this. Of course, no one say, oh, it's not valid, but it is good for my soul to participate in a Mass where it seems that is not give glory to God as should be. Of course, that is. And about Vatican II, Vatican II is so a big issue. We cannot forget that this is a council of the church. That is, of course, the danger also in the left, if you want to use this kind of label. So that they consider Vatican II it is a super dogma. So something that you cannot discuss, that you cannot criticize. Of course, that is the danger. I think that what Benedict XVI has tried with this hermeneutic of continuity. It was really to distance himself from this kind of excesses, like from the Bologna school. They are doing this, and there are other scholars, like let me mention, because I wrote a book with him recently, Cardinal Agostino Marchetto, that also wrote influential books on this topic. Also, because you say you are a musician, so you know very well that Sacrosanctum Concilium in its chapter 6 say that we have to preserve Gregorian chant, we have to preserve Latin, we have to preserve polyphony, we have to preserve the organ. So if one give a reading of this document that is not prejudicial, of course you can celebrate the Novus Ordo in a very, we may say, dignified way, also with music. The problem is no one is doing. So no one is doing it except very few people, very, very few. In my life, I cannot say that I have seen priests more than the finger of my hand that celebrate in this way. And I saw thousands and thousands of priests celebrating. So I know the problem. But here there is a question. There is a very simple question. So Jesus found a creative church, and he entrusted to Peter his church and to his successors. And we know in the church there is the truth and there are the means of salvation. Now, if we believe that, the church come until us with the present hierarchy or the present pope, we have also to, of course, see the situation, but find a way surviving in this environment. I don't say that I like it. It's not a question of liking it. But the problem is, if you start to say, like many are doing now, but the Pope maybe is not legitimate, or maybe the Pope is not the Pope. Okay, like this, we can, we can do what, maybe not even Francis, but also Francis, Benedict, John Paul II, they were not legitimate. So we can do like our own shop for popes we like and we don't like. But I'm sorry, this is a very, very big mistake. I think very big mistake. So we have to accept the situation, and we have to try for what we can to make aware other people of the danger we are. That's very simple. It's like, sorry if I talk a little too much, but it's like your family. If you have a father, and maybe he's not he's not a good father. Okay, he's a bad father, maybe do bad things, but he's still your father. You cannot say, he's no more my father, I will find another father. Of course, you can do it technically, but nothing will cancel that is your biological father. So we are in a similar situation.
I always like to remind my students that a third of the popes have been canonized and the other 2/3 have not. It always helps to put it in perspective, but it's practically speaking, I mean, it's hard to look around at the state of the church and say there's not issues, there's not problems, especially when it comes to the liturgy. So I completely echo everything that you said there. I feel like I'm in a sort of oasis of sorts here in the Diocese of Phoenix, in large measure due to the great work of Bishop Thomas Olmsted for many years before his retirement. But I have experienced Novus Ordo celebrated very, very beautifully, that puts organ and chant and pride of play, even ad orientem posture, altar boys, incense, all of the aesthetic, very, very well done, very celebrated reverently. But that's not the norm, and that's not something. So even if, like you say, we can point to a handful of examples, we can't ignore the 99% of Novus Ordos that are celebrated not only not up to some norm, but actually irreverently.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, is when I go traveling, the very first thing that I do is I'll Google whether there's a Fraternity of St. Peter or Institute of Christ the King parish where I'm going, because at least I know what I'm going to get, and it's going to be reverent, and it's going to be beautiful.
Yeah, but I fully understand, and as I pointed out before, I perfectly understand the people that feel disoriented, because myself too. I don't mean that I don't have my struggles, and I have very big struggle, especially in the recent years. So I very well, and I can tell you also, especially in the last years or months, even, I can see a lot of people that I know around me that they start to look in other direction. So this is why I become really alarmed. And I say, but what is happening? The people is starting living, even good people, I mean, very intellectually good people, that they cannot stand anymore the situation that it is now. I perfectly understand. So this is why I try to distance myself, from things, so that I don't become too much invested with the bad things that are coming today. And I try, as I tried in my book, to look at things objectively, and just to present that they look, this is what happened. If you have a better reconstruction, okay, do it. But I think this is why in my book I present traditionalism on the background of Catholic progressivism, because you cannot understand traditionalism, why people are doing this, if you don't understand what they were doing in the other side. Because,
Right.
of course, that is a reaction to what happened in the church in the recent decade. And what happened is really something unbelievable. I mean, really unbelievable. I mean, I don't know if in United States, I think will be the same, but we saw like liturgical books thrown away, and organist fired, and I mean all things like this. I have also in my house, in my books, I have some missal that I have saved because they want to destroy them, and even if I'm not a priest, I cannot accept that they were destroying these books from the 19th century, from the 18th century. We are not speaking. So I take it with me and I save it in my house. But you think this is something unbelievable. So we are throwing away our tradition, our treasures, the traces of our Catholic tradition. So the situation of an unspeakable abyss. But we have to be aware not to fall in another abyss. That is the part. We are like how you call the people that they walk like the one that are in the circus. They walk on the very little
tightrope.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
We are like that, acrobats. That we try to stand and not fall in one side or in another, but it's very difficult.
No, it certainly is. And it's in some ways it's simpler to just say to go in for one extreme or the other. It's much simpler. So I completely echo everything that you've said. And I see a lot of people struggling here in the United States. One of my former pastors who I worked for, he when he went to seminary, he was told, "Don't pray the rosary. That's for girls." And don't learn Latin because the church did away with that, and all these other things. But he also said that when he was a child in Canada, the statues were taken out to the parking lot and destroyed with sledgehammers. People were having a party. Stained glass was removed for regular glass. Altar rails were ripped out. I mean, like you say, this is completely unbelievable.
Yes.
If I didn't believe these people, I wouldn't believe this had actually happened. But I mean, if you go to any church in the United States, thankfully, I think in the United States, we're seeing a revival of, with groups like Floriani of Sacred Music and Adam Bartlett and others who are doing really great work in that
Yeah, for
respect.
example, Adam Bartlett, what he has done, he has tried to serve the Novus Ordo with kind of music and text that are according to what the council probably really wanted. So I don't mean that what he has done can be the best in the absolute term, but at least, these are people that are working seriously for the good of the Novus Ordo. So I'm sure there are, even in Italy, there are composers very good. They have composed very nice vernacular songs, very well written and also very singable and theologically very sound. But how come that the most part of this music is not sung in our churches, and instead they continue to spread this garbage that I know quite well the music of your country, because I was the director of music of the American Church in Rome for 10 years. So I'm very familiar with the Mass of Creation and all this other stuff that, of course, you would know better than me. But what I also noticed, there are some American composers. They did very nice things. I have to say, even for the new liturgy. For example, I'm sorry if I don't pronounce it well, but I remember this Alexander Peloquin, something like this. That Wright music, at least it was well written, and Richard Prue also. I think he did very nice things. I mean, so you see, there are good people, good things, but the problem is that the church is not promoting this kind of things, even for the Novus Ordo, but they are promoting the garbage. So there is something really wrong happening.
I think the tides are turning in some way. Archbishop Sample of Washington some time ago put out a very, very beautiful document on liturgical music.
I know.
And it's exactly what's in the documents of the church. Bishop Olmsted did something similar. And I know there's a committee of the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops who actually came out finally a couple of years ago and said, these songs should never, ever be played at Mass. And it was at least a start. It was only a few hymns. I would have added a lot more, but they said none of these. But like you say, I mean, even Adam Bartlett would acknowledge that what he's doing, for example, is a bridge. It's a first step, and it's not the terminus.
Yes.
So and I guess I'd like to get your thoughts on that too. One of the things that I found in my own work in a parish for 7 years was we operated under this hermeneutic that, all these changes that happened after Vatican II were done so violently, precipitously. The last thing that we would want to do pastorally is do the same thing, even if it's in the right direction. And so we wanted to make sure that we were not going overly slow. That's not the point, but find the right direction and bring people with us. Have proper catechesis to say, look, this is what the church actually proposes. This is what we need to be doing to make these scaffolded changes, these slow incremental changes, slow as needed, right? If people get on board, let's go a little quicker.
Yeah, I agree with you, but I also want to say that this going to the right direction, of course, cannot be that you one day you are playing David Us, and the following day you are doing Palestrina, because the people probably will not understand what happened. It is the same religion, but I think that people should be educated in a very consistent way. Very consistent, it has not to stop, because I know, and I know this for experience, that even people that are not religious, like you mentioned before when we were talking that I teach for 7 years in Macau, and it's true. And my students were Chinese students, very nice students, and but most of them they had no religion. Even if I was teaching in a Catholic school, but maybe in my choir, 2% were Catholics. The other they have no religion. And then so I start myself to teach them Latin, Gregorian chant, my own music in Latin, polyphony. And at the end, they really fall in love with this music, even if they don't have a religious attitude. So one have to be consistent. One have to explain the people why this is what should be done in the mass and not the other kind of music. I know that now the situation is so polarized that you will find the people that will oppose you a lot, and all these freak people that they were saying, no, we are the new church and blah 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 blah. We know this. But I'm sure that there will be also people that will say, like you know, you say, I play the guitar, I play the drum, because I didn't know what was the real thing.
Yeah, right.
The people, they didn't know. That's a problem. So we have to be sure that the people is exposed to this. And of course, the situation of the musical atmosphere is really poisoned by commercial music in a certain sense. But I'm sure there will be many people, and especially young people, that will really say, but this is something really different and that really make me pray.
Yeah, I mean, the Mass needs to be sung. We don't sing at Mass, we sing the Mass. And I think as soon as we latch on to that, I think it's something that anyone who is trying to follow Christ, trying to be a faithful son or daughter of the church, when they're exposed to these truths, they will accept them. I mean, for me, it was as simple as saying, I didn't know, for example, that there were antiphons. I had never looked at the Roman Missal. I didn't know there was an entrance, offertory, and communion antiphon. As soon as someone told me that, it started me down this pathway that I could never go back, because I said, why am I playing these songs? They're not even hymns. When there's texts from the church that are actually in the Missal, that are parts of the Mass, that are scriptural, that are not my words, but the words of our Lord, why would I want to do anything else? And as soon as I've proposed this to anyone else, or even just the distinction between something that's properly speaking liturgical or devotional, namely that liturgical is something that comes from God, we make it our own through our voice, and we offer it back to God. Whereas devotional is something that arises from the heart. It's not to say we can have devotional prayer, but not in the liturgy, not in the same way that we should prioritize the properly liturgical. As soon as you point this out to people, unless they're ideologically driven, they will come on board with that.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So it's been wonderful speaking with you. And I really do appreciate the book and what you're trying to do with laying out objectively what these different traditionalisms are, so that we can understand what the problems are, understand what the background of progressivism is, and maybe together try to find a way forward that is glorifying God and sanctifying man in the one Holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. Any final thoughts or words to share with us?
So I hope that when the people will read my book, they will learn how to respect the traditionalists. They don't mean that they have to share everything they say and they are doing, but at least to respect and to understand the reason behind certain actions and behaviors. So I really hope that this will be one of the outcome of my book.
Fantastic. Well, for those who are listening, from Sophia Institute Press, The Right Hand of the Lord is Exalted by Aurelio Porfiri. A History of Catholic Traditionalism from Vatican II to Traditionis Custodes. Aurelio, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. It was my pleasure.